Hi, this is Jim Tremayne, the editor of DJ Times Magazine, and welcome to the Digital DJ Expo here online. Before I get to our keynote Q&A subjects, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's visiting us online. I know it's been like one of the most bizarre years of all time, and we're doing the best to roll with the changes as much as possible. I'll mention this again at the end of this session, but we will be doing DJ Expo 2021 at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino next August. Check out all our platforms for all the latest information on that. We're looking forward to a very big event. So I want to introduce you to the Disco Fries, Danny and Nick. Danny, I'm not going to get this name right again.
I'll say it for you. Danny Boselovic.
Danny Boselovic. There we are. Yep. Nick Ditri, a little easier to pronounce. But I want to thank you guys for doing this. I know that you've been supporters of DJ Expo in the past. You've come to Atlantic City and you've participated, and we appreciate all of that. Now I'm here in Port Washington, Long Island. Where are you guys?
I'm down in Northern Virginia, kind of outside DC.
Which town?
I'm in Gainesville.
Gainesville. It's
Prince William County, so it's west.
Okay. All right. Beyond Arlington and all of that. Okay.
Yeah.
And Nick?
And I'm in Central Jersey, Red Bank area. So not too far from you.
All right. Jersey Shore. All good. Yep. All good.
Yep.
So before we get into the craziness of 2020 and what we've all been putting up with, I want to get back a little bit into your story because you guys are DJ producers who've done a lot of work. You've worked with the biggest stars in the world and some of the most underground people in the world. You've worked with Tiësto. You've worked with Tommie Sunshine. You've had Billboard hits. You've traveled the country. I've seen you DJ all over. But you two had more of a formal musical education than most of the DJ producers out there. Give us a quick rundown on how you guys met and connected to be a musical production team.
Yeah, so we both went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and we met their freshman year. We got roomed together in the dorms just by chance. And yeah, unfortunately, we both graduated, spent 4 years there, which is why we're not super mega stars. Like all the alumni they brag about that we're only there for about a semester.
Right.
But yeah, so we, I majored in music synthesis. Nick did contemporary writing and production. So we kind of had different focuses while we were there. And we still use a lot of the knowledge we got there. And of course, connections are great as well.
Let me ask you a little bit about musical education and the level of respect that DJs get in electronic music gets. I know I talked many years ago to some instructors there, and it was a bit of an uphill climb in the 90s, but I think things changed by the time you guys got up to Boston, right?
It was interesting. I think it was starting to change. When I was there, being in the music synth side, it was a lot of electronic music production kind of stuff. But not that many people were interested in the commercial side of it. They were much more interested in guys like BT or Autechre or Boards of Canada, kind of like more heady electronic music. But I think now that's changed and is probably reflecting more of the contemporary styles of dance music.
And what was the attitude, say, from the instructors about DJing as opposed to composition?
It was mixed, just because of the backgrounds of the faculty. Like some of them did come from the DJ club world, but I'd say the majority of them were composers. So I can think specifically, Nick would probably remember, we did a ensemble class together that was basically like electronic music. I forget what the name of it was, but it was, yeah, you would get up and perform your like dance tracks or whatever, and everyone had these very like nuanced, complicated electronic songs, and then Nick and I went up and played a remix we did, a bootleg remix of Usher, and That was like we had three heads.
Hey, at least people were dancing to it, right?
Yeah.
I know also that Steven Weber very much flew the flag for DJs and scratch DJs,
For sure.
especially in the 90s. He really shined a light on that side of the DJ market and world, and we really appreciated it. I know I hung out with him at a lot of battles and so forth, and he really flew the flag for DJs. Let's talk a little bit about your influences. I know that is a pretty diverse situation as well. Nick, what were you into by the time you went off to school?
So I was like heavy into hip hop going into school. Because I went in on piano, I grew up on like a lot of Gershwin, Irving Berlin, like old standards and Motown and stuff like that. But I personally listened to a lot of hip hop and West Coast G-Funk, Dr. Dre, like heavily. So aside from that, like parallel to that, obviously, you know what was going on New York radio and New York Underground and all that stuff happening. It was kind of hard to avoid. And I love that stuff.
A lot of mix shows.
Yeah, a ton of mix shows. And I loved a lot of that too. So I went into Berkeley like pretty influenced by both hip hop and the dance music that was happening like late night on KTU. So it was interesting when I met Danny, who was not into any of that.
And Danny, you were more into, I guess, more alt sounds, I suppose?
Yeah, so I listened to a lot of more like indie or alternative through high school, but eventually got into bands like Radiohead and Air, which had a lot of electronic sounds and influences. So that was sort of my gateway into that sound set. I was familiar with guys like Tiësto, Benny Benassi, Darude, guys that had like hits that kind of crossed outside of that community.
Very melodic stuff as well.
Yeah, totally. But it really wasn't until college that I got introduced to some of the more the commercial dance that we're into now.
Right. So how did you, very quickly, but very briefly, I should say, how did you two build a career? I know I saw you guys working it at DJ Expo, Winter Music Conference. You guys were out there really making connections, and you were not shy about it, which is something that a lot of DJs really ought to know about. How did you two guys begin your career ascent?
Well, number one, Jim, thank you, because you were one of the first people that, put us on the map as far as the DJ Expo goes. And that was a huge launching pad for us. I was in the mobile DJ world doing like weddings and Sweet 16s and stuff like that, and picking up bootlegs online. So that was one of the first things Danny and I started doing, was like taking old 80s records and like Take Me Home Tonight, Eddie Money, like all these old records. And we started remixing those and then giving them to guys at the expo and other mix show and mobile guys. And we started building the name that way, which I think is pretty different than a lot of people in dance music now. But that platform of like the DJ Expo, the mobile guys, the mix show guys, who kind of are all that same pool. I think that was our biggest launching pad from the beginning, which obviously led to official remixes. And then off of the official remixes, we said to ourselves, like, well, we don't want to be remixers forever. We want to be known for our original music, because at our heart, we're musicians. Like, we want to create from scratch.
And you get the publishing.
And there's that.
We weren't thinking about that at the time, but yeah, that was a perk.
Right.
So that was kind of the progression.
Okay. And what do you think was your first really big break in terms of the music industry and how it happened?
Hard to say. I think the thing that crossed or got our name in front of the most people was when we connected with Tiësto. I can't even remember how long ago it was now, but he started playing a few of our tracks that had been supported by Hardwell and some other big names. And he reached out to us directly on Twitter, and we started doing some production stuff with him through that. And then once we had our track out, we had a track out with him called iTrance that came out during ADE 2016 or 20.
Amsterdam dance event, kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And seeing Tiësto and Disco Fries together, then that was definitely a big crossover point for us.
Yeah, that'll get a little notice, I would imagine,
Yeah.
beyond Holland.
I think there was a lot of little wins though that
Totally.
just, like some guys just have like the record that goes, and now it could be just a TikTok thing that just goes.
Okay.
But for us, it definitely was like, all right, we got a remix on Sirius XM. We got the Tiësto thing. Then it's like each thing led to other opportunities, and it just grew outward. And to our credit, like we were good about like really diversifying too. So like as we get this win with Tiësto, and we saw what he was doing with Musical Freedom, we'd be like, all right, let's start a label. And then like we grew outward that way. And then we saw publishing start to work. So it's like, all right, let's start a publishing company. Let's get some writers on board and like start working with them. And like each little win led to some other like tree branch of the whole system.
Did you have management at that time, or how was that working?
We had somebody who kind of like helped us and like made sure we weren't screwed. But I think the main thing was like we were always super involved, self-propelled, like,
right.
And learned. I mean, for better or for worse. Yeah, for better or for worse, some situations weren't the best how we learned, but we definitely like learned all the components to the business. So when it was time for us to just do our own thing and be self-managed as we are now, like we know each component of the machine. Yeah,
sometimes learning the hard way is the best way. It's no fun, but you definitely take your lumps. So we'll get more into some more of your studio work, but I want to get into the DJing a little bit. Nick, you said you were working a lot of mobile events. What did you learn from that? I know I talked to a lot of DJs over the years, and most of them tell me the most important thing is playing in front of anybody at any time and different types of audiences. What did you learn from your mobile experiences?
That's 100% accurate. I think like when you walk into a venue to play a wedding, that whole crowd could be like 60 and up. You don't know.
Good thing you know you're George Gershwin, right?
Yeah, 100%. But like you do have to learn different cultures, different age groups, and you've got to be on the fly with it. You also have to learn how to play to a room of 3 people. Like sometimes everybody's sitting down and 3 people are dancing. So how are you going to target that? And Danny and I sure have been in plenty of clubs where it's been that type of situation.
Yeah, we also, I think like building upon that, a lot of the early gigs we played were not nightclubs. They were bars, Pigpen, in somewhere in Pennsylvania. We played these
where they're counting the votes right now, basically.
Exactly.
Yes, hopefully, right. Yeah.
And so it forced us to learn how to read rooms that weren't necessarily interested in listening to our music. They were just there because that's where they were going to be on Friday night. And it really set us up for gigs down the road, like in Vegas, where you have to be able to read the room.
Right. You have to look at the audience and kind of understand who you're playing for just by vision.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's a skill that, especially some producers that get a very big following online or just from their music and then transition very quickly into the DJing world, miss out on that. And it can be kind of a rude awakening if they're put in front of a crowd that's not catered to them.
Right. There are people who are producers first who become DJs and they never really learned how to rock a room.
Yeah.
They just play their tracks or their mixes or their edits. And if it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. They don't have a safety valve to go to. So, Danny, I want to ask you about getting into the DJ side of things. I know you were more of a musician at first. When did you get acclimated to DJing, and when did you really start getting into it?
So I had an extremely unconventional means of learning how to DJ because I didn't have any equipment. Nick had some old CDJs that I would mess around with when I was at his studio. But honestly, when we got booked for our first gig, I couldn't DJ. And so Nick DJ'd the whole thing. And I brought a laptop and a keyboard and kind of like made some noises on the side. But through that, I would hop on for like a song or two and just practice while Nick was doing his thing. And so I sort of just learned at the club by, I'd hop on. If I started to train wreck, Nick would hop on, help me out. And we just did that enough until we got to the point where we were comfortable. And We were on Serato at the time early on, which I think is in some ways was an easy way to get started because you have that visual aspect. There's a lot of things that make it easier than just CDJs alone.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the evolution of your setups. Nick, what were you starting on and what are you playing on now?
So when I started, I was on like rack mount, like the old rack mount system. And
What,
then
like Denons or something?
yeah, like a Denon
The
type.
dual drive things?
Yep,
Okay.
100%. And
DN 2000s, I think, or 2500s perhaps?
something like that.
Yeah.
But also on turntables. Like I always learned on turntables, but for practical purposes, especially with like mobile DJing, it just was for a rig, it was more conducive to go out with a rack. So anyway, from that, went to the 800s, the CDJ 800s. And then in the clubs, we were always playing on 1000s, like early on. And then we had Serato linked in with all that. So Serato was like the main part of our setup for years. And then on the side, Danny would have Ableton running with samples, like he said. So he'd do like a trigger pad with Little John samples and air horns and all types of drums.
Right.
And
Sorry,
then,
the lights went out.
no. It's very 2020 over there, just random shit happening.
Yeah. There we go.
And then now, more recently, we've just completely gone to sticks on CDJs, and it's been really good. I mean, like the transition was just like an adjustment because some sets we would do in Serato, some we would do on sticks, and it was just kind of this back and forth until we got the groove of it. But it works really well for us now.
And how do you see the near future of DJing? Are you still very comfortable with the USBs, or is there something you'd like to see the DJ companies come up with? Do you want to see more of a performance aspect connected to it? I know Roland has been making some products like that.
I'd love to see us doing something like that again.
Yeah, especially being a duo, it's natural for us to want to have like a separate thing so that both of us can be actively involved in the music rather than just hopping on and off for records. But it's a tricky thing to figure out because the way that it's integrated has to be right. I know for a while we were using I forget what it was called. I think maybe the bridge was when you could run Serato and Ableton like linked together. And when that happened, we were like, oh, this is going to be amazing. That's basically what we're already doing, but it's going to make it easier. And we're going to be able to put in stems from our song and like kind of mix it live. And it just never really worked out the way that we thought it would. So it's a tricky thing to tackle, and often simpler is better.
Right.
And like Danny said earlier, like we're always playing different types of venues. So one day it might be a festival type thing or like a really high end cutting edge venue. And the next day we might be in the middle of nowhere in Canada where it's like, guys, you're going to be lucky if you get a setup that was like made 6 years ago, let alone like last year. So for us, it's got to be almost something that just works cross platform. Right. And I don't think we're there yet in a lot of markets.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the venues you've played. I always like to ask traveling DJs a couple of wonderful venues, favorite venues that you have played or generally play.
I think these are going to be the same for most of us. Scottsdale, Arizona is one of our favorite places to play because it's just a party town Thursday through Sunday. We do the day parties there, and we've played a couple different spots in Scottsdale. We also, it's been quite a while, but early on we would do trips like twice a year to Hong Kong. And there was a group of clubs that we played out there, Mint and what was the other, Beijing Club. I don't even know if they're around anymore, but they were just spots that were such a blast, and it was early in our career. So it was like,
the travel wasn't a big deal.
Oh, yeah, not at all. Our first trip out there, I forget what it was, but it was something like 24 hours to get there. We spent 36 hours in the country, and then we flew 24 hours back.
Yeah, you go right over the pole. Yeah, not a problem. Yeah. So do you guys like playing Vegas?
Yes, it depends on the weekend, but generally we enjoy it. It's just we treat it as a different thing because the market is entirely different than anywhere in the world, and for that reason, it's awesome. But the other part of Vegas for us that I think is a drawback is if we do want to play like a block of time that's like a little more self-indulgent, you can't necessarily do that there.
Yeah, they want the hits.
They definitely want the hits. But it's a great party market. Much like when we do a weekend of Scottsdale to Vegas, number one, we want to die on Monday, but it's like it's the most fun ever. Yeah. So
absolutely. Yeah. So let me get back into 2020. So how did the pandemic affect your careers?
I mean, it's been a huge adjustment.
Yeah.
We had gigs all the way up until like right before everyone locked down. We played in Atlanta, we played in Texas, and then we probably had 6 or 7 dates on the books after that all got wiped. And it's just been a huge adjustment across the board. Luckily for us, we weren't so dependent on our touring for income. Like Nick mentioned before, we diversified a lot, do production and mixing for other artists. There's other artists that we kind of look after and mentor. So we have a bunch of different revenue streams. But apart from that, we both have young kids. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old who are no longer in daycare. And so being a dad occupies a lot of my time now. So I've had to shift around when I can get work done. It's been an adjustment. Some positives from it, but a lot of struggles too.
2021 can't come fast enough, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, much like Danny, like you said, I have kids, and it's been like the work from home thing has always been like, this is amazing. Everybody's gone, and like I can just put my head in it and get stuff done, take phone calls whenever, and obviously like that's shifted completely. But I think the positive for us has just been like the workflow that we've always had online has been like, we've improved upon that. We hired a label manager for our labels because we were doing everything. Like we were doing all Disco Fries, running the label, doing the artwork, like just the two of us doing everything. And
very punk rock of you.
Yeah. And like, it's allowed us to kind of like, all right, we're going to delegate this to this guy and this to this other guy. And I think fast forward to a year or 2 years from now, like we'll look back and be like, oh, that was such a good move. Because we've been able to scale and do X, Y, Z, which is a good segue into why we launched the new site.
Exactly. I was going to ask you about that. You came up with the idea of finishmytrack.com. Do you want to explain that to the listeners?
Sure.
Danny, do you want to?
Well, yeah. So this was 100% Nick's idea, but it was the best idea he's ever had, I think. Basically, the finishmytrack.com is to help artists, producers that have music that sounds good, but could sound better. Because we find a lot of times it's very easy to get your track to 80% done or 90% done, but often it's getting it to 100 that's going to make the difference of people actually paying attention to it or labels signing it. And we've done enough of this work over the years for tracks and artists that we've signed to our label, and also just for friends, that we've gotten pretty good at knowing what a record needs to get it sounding professional, taking it from like that very good stage to excellent stage. And that entails mixing, mastering, us giving advice on arrangement, sound selection, kind of everything.
And it can be something as minute as just, hey, your kick drum's wrong.
100%.
Yeah.
And basically we offer the options of, we offer basically a feedback thing where producers can submit their tracks. We'll just listen to it and give them a really detailed rundown of everything that we think they could do to improve it without actually putting our hands on it, or we'll do stereo masters, or if it's something that needs a little bit more work, we'll get stems and do a mix and master from there. And then also try to explain along the way what we're doing so that there's a bit of an education aspect to it too, so the producers can grow.
Right.
Part of what inspires that is we've worked with this mastering team in England for a long time, Wired Masters. And at this point, it's been 10 years plus. And every time they send something back and it sounds better, we always write and say, like, what did you do with this thing here that made it sound better? And I feel like we've learned a lot over the years doing that. So to be able to offer that same type of service to others was really important to us.
Right. I see that you break it down into 4 different phases, and there's different fee structures, et cetera, depending on what the client wants.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And like one that we're working on now, the artist basically was like, I'm happy with the song generally, but like, I know you're going to have to swap out some things. And this is the case in a lot of instances. Even artists on our label will sign a record and we always ask, like, are you open to us, like, kind of having a hand in it? And like, we'll go in and maybe just swap out the drums. Like maybe everything around the drums is awesome, but the drums suck. So like, we'll just go in and swap those out, reprogram them, whatever. Or maybe it's like the lead synth in the drop needs to be retooled and everything else is fine. So like, in a lot of instances, that'll be the case. So yeah, it's kind of like running the gamut from like, hey, you want to do it yourself? This is what we would do. Here's all the feedback to, you know, if you got a piano demo and you want to turn it into a song, we can make that happen. But a lot of it falls in between both of those.
Right. And it's nice to have a website that can attract people and literally bring you business.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what you have in the studio. We don't want to do, I guess, too much of a deep dive because we don't want to go through maybe every plugin you own or use, but give us the basics of the Disco Fries studio. What's your DAW? What's your controller? What are the main elements?
So we're both Mac guys. We used Logic for the majority of our career. I've switched over to Ableton in the past 3 years or something like that. Nick is still in Logic, but we're both comfortable in either. So often what we do is we pass sessions back and forth that way, or we'll run stems if one of us gets finished with what we're doing and we want to get it into the other DAW. Apart from that, we both use same kind of plugins as everybody, Serum, FabFilter stuff.
Sound Toys.
Splice.
And anything new? I know we did a magazine interview recently, and you mentioned a couple of newer hot items. You want to? I'm the guy that.
Yeah, I'm the guy that refreshes like KVR and Synthtopia every morning to see like if there's anything new coming, and there's been a lot of interesting stuff. Isotope is doing great things with like the AI powered plugins, and there's a lot of similar types of things. One is the Gullfoss EQ, and it's basically just something you put on, and there's only a few controls, like recover frequencies that are missing in your mix or tame frequencies that are overly dominant in your mix, and it's just kind of this magic, makes it sound better without having to do anything really. There's a lot of plugins like that. The other one that a lot of people are talking about and we use now is Soothe, which is kind of a dynamic EQ that, I'm trying to think the best way to explain it. It'll catch resonances and kind of like tame them dynamically. So instead of going in with an EQ, finding the one part that's very resonant in a vocal and notching it out and then automating when it's overly harsh, this plugin finds those frequencies and reduces them for you.
It's similar to a multi-band in a way. It is kind of like a multi-band, but just something about it is a lot slicker with the way it functions. And it's a little bit more like plug and play. Like you don't need to make as many fine tuning adjustments.
Yeah.
How are you guys working with vocalists these days?
Just like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little different.
Yeah, we do like to get in the studio with vocalists, but we haven't had the opportunity to as much as we would like. So often it's just top liners sending over, here's a bunch of stuff, and then we work around it, send it back, see if they're into it. We've always done a lot of remote work with vocalists anyway, so hasn't affected us a whole lot.
Okay. I want to get into the sort of advice section for some of the up and coming DJ producers. For a DJ, maybe somebody who's a mobile DJ or a DJ of some sort who wants to make records eventually, how do you get started? What's the most important thing to get your studio started at home?
I think just get some basic kind of setup. It doesn't matter what it is, what DAW, whatever's affordable or available.
You want to very quickly explain what a digital audio workstation is?
Yeah, so that's basically how you're going to manipulate, chop up, arrange audio and MIDI to control any sort of virtual instruments you're putting in. So to be able to lay out all the different elements of your track on a timeline to really create your track that's how you would do it. And then once you have some basic sort of workstation, then just go to YouTube. There's a million channels that can get you started. There's plenty of channels that'll give you ideas on how to get started. And then it's just really a matter of putting in time. In some ways, it's weird for us because there's so many tools available now.
A lot of sounds out there.
Sounds and just ideas, presets, all kinds of stuff that we didn't really have access to when we got started. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to that.
Of course.
It's accessible to everyone, but then you also can't just
copy.
Yeah, totally. And
yeah, there's so many sample packs out there. It's hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we get like a tremendous amount of music sent to our label that we have to then decipher, like, all right, was this a sample vocal from a pack? And then we have to internally decide, is it okay? Like, has this been like used a million times, or can we put it out? Is it fine? And there's many instances where I'm not going to even name them because it's not fair to these artists, but like there's many instances where songs have come out with like sampled vocals from Splice, right off of Splice, that have been used a million times, and they've done extraordinary. So, I mean, for us, the metric is always like, is it dope? If it's dope, then like, I don't really give a shit where it came from as long as it was legally done, you know?
Yeah, you usually know pretty quickly when you put the track on.
Right.
Yeah.
Some advice to people who are coming up with tracks. And I mean, I know, like I said, I talked to a lot of DJ producers. Generally, the consensus is maybe copy things at first just to get your chops down, but ultimately you have to find your own voice. Is that something you agree with?
Totally. I think it's a great exercise to take a track that you like and try to recreate it. You can learn a lot doing that. But then once you kind of get beyond that stage of just figuring out the basics, that's when you can start to develop your sound.
There's a ton of cool like YouTube channels like Danny was talking about where guys will recreate records and they'll drop in the link to the session. So you can just go and type in like whatever, how they made Drake's record, sure, whatever, and then grab the session down and like just look at the components and how it's built. I mean, it's like if you're learning to build a house, like you got to copy the house that came before it to learn how to do it, and then you could go do whatever the fuck you want.
Right.
So I think it's the same deal.
So when things get back to some semblance of normal, I hope, what advice would you give to DJs or people who want to get started in this game? Where do you start? Is it production? Is it DJing? Is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both, but play to whatever your strength is. If it's someone who started music production in middle school, high school, something like that, and has kind of built up some good chops, then you've got a leg up on everybody, and that's a good way to get your name out there, get people's attention. It's really, you could go either way, but the important thing is to try to connect with other people. It's extremely hard to just float stuff out online and have it get recognized and blow up that way. So the more people you network with, whether that's going out to nightclubs, linking up with people there, doing the like online Discord kind of thing, one of those communities, just something that starts to get you a good circle of like-minded producers, artists, DJs around you.
Network in some way.
Yeah.
Also, the idea of teaming, let's say you're not a traditional musician, maybe you don't have an instrument. It can be very beneficial to hook up with somebody who sort of understands chords and changes and things like that. I know, you know, people like Gabriel and Dresden, a classic example of that. You know, like Dave was more the DJ guy, whereas Josh is the guy with more of the musical chops. You guys had a little bit of both, I would imagine, which gives you another kind of advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but you mentioning that makes us think, or makes me think of our relationship with Tommie Sunshine, because Tommie Sunshine
Oh my God, yeah.
he's not going to be talking about, you know, like, I don't know about the ninth on that one chord. You really got to chord voicings, check it out. But he's like an encyclopedia of club music.
Yep.
So he brings a very different perspective than what Nick and I have. And it makes for a great team. It's a great working.
I mean, you could hear it in the music. If you listen to any record we've ever done with Tommie, it is very different than what we would do on our own.
Yeah.
And so that's the proof is right there, I think.
Right, and a DJ can give a very unique perspective on whether a track works or not in a nightclub.
Yep, for sure.
They'll know in a hurry. So we got a couple more minutes. What are you guys looking forward to next year, aside from, you know, just the idea of going into a restaurant or anything of the like? What are you hoping for in 2021? And let's say as it relates to the music industry as well.
Oh, the music industry as a whole.
I think, I mean, we're in the best period of time for art because people have so much time on their hands, because they're so frustrated and as they should be. And, you know, all these things create really dope art. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out next year. I've heard like a lot of the bigger labels have held back a lot of music. Even some of the indies have, just to, especially in the dance community, because the biggest, you know, place to play it out and get it supported is in a club, which none of us can visit right now. So I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of the music. And then like our buddies who run Beat Source are doing really cool stuff with Pioneer and like, you know, being able to download your catalog live on the fly right to a CDJ, I think is going to open up a world of possibilities there.
Have you guys done any live streaming at all?
We have not.
We haven't. I think partially because we're not close enough to get up in the same place to do it. I have a setup here for DJing. I don't know that Nick has something at his place. We should have gotten on like some production live stream stuff, but
we've done some demo drops, which have been fun. Like I'll hop on Instagram and Facebook and do like an hour and a half of kind of just critiquing records, giving feedback on the fly, you know, letting guys submit records to us for our radio show and our label. And that's been really fun. And like, I need to do it more often because every time I do it, I'm like, fuck, this is we find so much dope music for people who otherwise wouldn't reach out. They just happen to be like surfing around at that time. So that's been really cool. And it's actually like builds like a cool community of people too, because inevitably like other people are listening to whatever song I'm playing and they're feeding back on it. And you get a lot of cool, like interesting thoughts and producers on there. So that's probably the only live streaming we've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of the music production companies over the summer during the pandemic. We did a series of videos, and it seemed like a lot of the production gear, a lot of the software, and obviously a lot of the podcasting type gear, microphones, et cetera, were the things that were still selling, even during the pandemic, because people actually were hunkering down and making music. So if there was any kind of upside for the DJ segment, that seems to be what it was.
Yeah, definitely.
So wrapping it up, what do we have to look forward to from the Disco Fries in 2021? You have tracks, you have any collabs, anything interesting that we need to look for?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of music. We've been releasing stuff fairly steadily through the summer and through the lockdown, everything. Our track with Bingo Players just came out maybe about a month ago, and that's been doing really well. It's been great to see people's reaction to that. But we have a bunch more music coming up, both on our label and on others. And
a remix with Tommie actually in like 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, right.
And a single tomorrow. It's like every other week there's
that's
something.
awesome. And hopefully some real clubs, not necessarily drive-ins.
Ideally.
Yeah, ideally.
Okay.
I don't know. We've got a date on the books.
I saw that.
February, so we'll see.
You're going to be playing outdoors in February?
We got hit up, right, Nick, about doing some club in.
Oh, a club. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, this was 2 months ago, and they were hopeful then. So we'll see.
All right. Well,
where we're at.
I totally forgot about that. Just completely.
Hey, fingers crossed. I think we're going to all be in a very different place in 2021, and that goes for a lot of quadrants of our culture. And we're very much looking forward to it. I want to thank Danny and Nick so much for taking the time to do this for Digital DJ Expo, and want to remind everybody else to take a look at the other videos that a lot of the other DJs have done for us this week. Whether you're a mobile DJ or club DJ, upstart, we think we're going to have something for you. And keep in mind, August 9th through 12th, 2021, DJ Expo will be at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. We hope to see you there. Thank you very much, and we'll catch up with you guys soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, man.
All righty.